The FDA's expected decision to authorize a third coronavirus vaccine dose comes as the White House intensifies its push to vaccinate more Americans amid the growing surge in COVID cases across the country. For more on this, let's bring in Weijia Jiang. She's with us now from the White House. Weijia, good morning. What are you hearing from the White House on the FDA's decision to authorize a third dose, specifically for immunocompromised people?
Good morning to you both, and good morning, everybody. So sources tell us that we expect the FDA to amend its emergency use authorization to include a third shot for those immunocompromised people today. And we had Dr. Fauci, of course, talking about it this morning on CBS this morning. And Vlad, you did the interview, so you know very well that basically the problem is that they do not have the level of protection that is required, that is needed, that others have that are not immunocompromised to fend off and to offer this protection from the virus, especially as the Delta variant continues to surge and make its way across the country. He also said that it is likely that the rest of us who have been vaccinated will probably have to get a booster shot also at some point, although it's not clear when. And the White House has said many, many times that as of right now, the data shows that that's not necessary, but certainly that's something that they are planning for in case it becomes necessary. So, I think this is very significant to show just how fast things are changing, especially in light of the Delta variant. And Dr. Fauci even said they're monitoring this in real time, and so we don't know what's ahead. But we do expect that today the FDA will authorize that third booster shot for people who have compromised immune systems.
Yeah, Weijia, that's the one question that it seems that everybody has. Booster shots, not only for the immune compromised, but also for folks who received the vaccine earlier in the year. And of course, the second one is when the FDA is going to finally give approval to the vaccines. That is something that is on a lot of people's minds as well. Sticking with the notion of healthcare, Weijia, President Biden is also calling on Congress to lower drug prices. He's actually expected to address this later this morning. What is the Biden administration's plan when it comes to this issue?
So the bottom line is that he wants to make drug prices cheaper for Americans. I don't know if you have anecdotal experience, but there is a tendency for these prices to surge, and we've seen some pretty frightening cases in which people cannot afford their prescription drugs that they need. And so the administration is urging Congress to pass legislation that, for one, would penalize drug companies that inflate their prices. We already know that he has signed an executive order to have every agency look at their cost and try to bring down prices, including for drugs. And he also wants to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. So it is several different steps that they're trying to get into a bill. But as we know, as we've been talking about, there are so many things right now on the president's legislative agenda, and there's only so much time for these lawmakers to get it done. But he is calling for this today. In just a few hours, we are expected to hear directly from the president on it.
Yeah, who could forget, I think, when the EpiPen, there was a price hike that was like in the hundreds of thousands of percent. It was disturbing to a lot of people. And then, of course, notorious Pharma Bro and the price hike that he brought into for the company that he worked with. Meanwhile, President Biden is criticizing, or is rather facing criticism over rising inflation and gas prices. Now, he argues that the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the budget resolution will help make the economy more efficient. But critics say, no. All that spending is actually going to make inflation worse. Here's what he had to say.
Right now, our experts believe, the major independent forecasters agree as well, that these bottlenecks and price spikes will reduce as our economy continues to heal. And while today's consumer price report points in that direction, we will keep a careful eye on inflation each month and trust the Fed to take appropriate action if and when is needed. Today, gas prices are lower than they were early in this decade, but they're still high enough to create a pinch on working families. One key thing about the infrastructure bill that just passed the Senate is there are no gas tax increases.
All right, so what is the White House's plan to address this? We already know that Republicans have been bringing this up, particularly as parents head out to shop for back-to-school items, and they're seeing that the prices are a bit more expensive than they were last year. So what's the White House saying?
Well, they're saying exactly what the president just said, and they're trying to reiterate the fact that this is just temporary, and that once the economy continues to grow, because we are hopefully getting out of the woods in some areas and things are able to start opening up again, that there will be less pressure here and that things will even out. And one reason that they say this is happening is because there was an economic boom, and because we had so many months of a stagnant activity, all of a sudden there is going to be a supply and demand issue. And so they really believe, they're making the case that that will all, eventually, sooner than later, according to White House officials, level out. But, that's not very helpful for parents and, people who are just trying to make ends meet, especially, as you mentioned, Anne-Marie, trying to get back to school and get supplies. And so that's why they also continue to stress the importance of these economic plans to really be implemented after they make their way to the president's desk, and that could take several more months.
Weijia, switching gears now, President Biden has been banking on ending America's longest war in Afghanistan as part of his legacy. However, as you now know, the Taliban are seizing key cities and they're intensifying their offensive across the country as U.S. troops withdraw. Now, the president has said he doesn't regret his decision, but what kind of political risks is he facing during this crisis, and what do we expect to hear from other players, like, for example, the Secretary of State?
So the White House has made clear that, the president's decision fell in line with what the majority of Americans wanted and believed is the right move, which is to remove U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. And in fact, this is one of the very, very few policy decisions that the Biden administration and the Trump administration agreed on. But as you mentioned, the situation there is rapidly deteriorating. And I don't know that anybody thought that this would happen so quickly, that the Taliban would be able to move so forcefully and so fast and take down so many capitals, in a very short amount of time. So now the question is, what happens if the Afghan government falls altogether? And the president has said many times he does not believe that's inevitable. He says the Afghan troops have the resources, they have the training, and they have the funding that the U.S. will continue to provide to fight back and to defend itself. The biggest concern, as far as the U.S. goes, is the resurgence of al-Qaeda and what that could mean if terrorism has a hub again to grow there. And so that is really where the political risk is. But the president has said that there are other measures in place to monitor terrorism and to make sure that does not happen. The former president, Trump, just issued a statement a bit ago to say that the difference is that under his plan, there would have been conditions to pull out of Afghanistan that the Taliban would have had to agree to. And, he was trying to directly negotiate with the Taliban, which is something President Biden refuses to do because he says that's just, not feasible. There's no reason to trust them. And so I think you're already seeing Republicans trying to lay an argument against what this administration is doing, even though in the end, it is the same, which is bringing the troops back home.
Excellent distinction. Weijia, as always, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Sure.